Today we're going to be talking about addictions, because there's certainly a connection between complex trauma and addiction. So we're going to identify exactly what that connection is and how you can break free of your addictions and keep yourself free from any addictions that you fear you could develop in the future. For Susan, her addiction became gambling. She didn't expect something like that to happen. She was a housewife. Her husband made enough to pay the majority of the bills. She raised her children, but when her children were school age, she did find herself to be a little bit bored. And she got a coupon in the mail for a local new casino that had been opened up. And so she decided just to do something different one day, just to alleviate the boredom. And so she went down to the casino and they gave her 5-star treatment, free chips that she could play with. And she figured, what is the harm if they're going to give me money to play with? And so she started playing around with the free chips. And in time, she started to kind of learn the ins and outs of how to work the tables and the machines, and she would win. And over time, she actually started going back and making substantial winnings. They were able to pay bills with some of her winnings from the casino. But of course, as the dopamine levels rose and she was starting to get good at what she was doing, she started to lose touch a bit with how in control she was. And this habit became a bit compulsory. She felt like she needed to be there at the casino. She started to feel drawn to it. And when she would lose, her desire to be there and to keep playing was even higher than the other times when she was actually winning on the machines. And so what we see developing with Susan is an addiction. And so she's going out and she's trying to fulfill this addiction. It wasn't just about the money for her at first. It was something to alleviate the boredom. But over time, this effort to alleviate her own boredom actually started to create and facilitate a need, a desire to keep filling this dopamine addiction of going and playing those slots and playing those tables. When she would win, at first she would be on a high, but when she would lose, she would be on such a low. And when she wasn't doing it, she would find she was also on a low. And so she started to yearn to be back playing, even at random times where she was just spending time with her family. Nothing else was really fulfilling her over time, like being in the casino. And so she developed that gambling addiction, and it absorbed her and it ruined her life. She ended up losing all of her money. She ended up going into debt by hundreds of thousands of dollars. She ended up spending out the inheritance her parents gave her, which she promised herself she wouldn't do, but she ended up doing it. Addictions cause us to act in a way that's irrational, and we end up harming ourselves and harming others. Her family was devastated. And her marriage, of course, suffered as a result of her irresponsible behavior. But that's what addictions do. And people don't seem to understand addiction from the outside. So they kind of take an approach like, come on, pick yourself up by your bootstraps. Or if you just had enough self-control, you wouldn't have to be addicted. But is it really that simple? Brain scans of persons who have used drugs show that the brain actually changes as a result of the drugs. It starts to shut down parts of the brain. So you have to understand that a person who has an addiction, especially to drugs, drug usage changes the brain. So they're not operating with the same mental faculties that you or I would be operating with. So just to tell them, hey, just don't do it, that's simply not going to cut it. But why does addiction happen, and what is really the correlation between addiction and complex trauma, if there really is any? Well, we have to go back to the way that we were made in the first place. As human beings, our design, our hardware is for love and abundance. We were made to live in love and abundance, to have connection. So that should be our base default state. But someone who comes from a background of complex trauma is living in anything but love and abundance because they were not poured into as a child. They were not given that love and abundance. The most common cause of complex trauma is emotional abandonment. So of all the abuse forms, the one that really tends to consistently cause the most long-lasting scars is emotional abandonment. So people will say, well, Roman, I don't have any trauma. I mean, I grew up in a good household. My mom and dad were there. They had plenty of money for us. It's like, yes, but did you feel like your parents were there for you emotionally? And they go, oh, no, actually, I felt like I couldn't talk to my dad. And I felt like my mom was always distracted. That is trauma. Neglect and abandonment causes complex trauma. And it's deep. Now, when we say complex trauma, it just means instead of there being one simple trauma, like one time, one thing really bad happened, it means that you lived consistently in a deprivated state. And what you didn't have was the love, the connection, the abundance. Instead, you're living in an environment of love scarcity. And this causes a constant trauma on a child because a child needs love. It would be like them growing up with a scarcity of food. This is very traumatic to their development. And so what you need in the emotional realm or in the energy realm, when that's deprived from you, then you develop that trauma or that emotional wound. It's like a hole, as survivors describe it. And it's like they're constantly trying to fill that hole because they have that program from childhood. I need to fill this hole. But it goes deeper than that. They are no longer living in a state of love. They're no longer living in a state of control. They are living in a state of fear because those who come from complex trauma developed a fear as a result of the deprivation. They started to feel as if they were going to be abandoned constantly. They were afraid that when their parents got a little bit upset, they were afraid that they would not be found worthy in the eyes of others. And so fear starts to more and more take over the life of a survivor, of a child, of a teenager who's growing up in a household of complex trauma. And then narcissistic parents and egocentric parents want to control their children. And so just like many people in authority in the secular system, they use fear to try to control the child. Instead of in a healthy family, the parents would instill an atmosphere of love. Unhealthy parents instill an atmosphere of fear. And so they cause further wounds on a sensitive child by trying to control them through fear. You're going to get hit if you don't do the right thing. I'm going to become rageful if you don't do the right thing. And sometimes it wasn't even clear what the right thing was. So the children had to constantly live in a state of hypervigilance, wondering what is it they're going to do, or what are they doing wrong that's causing them to not be loved. And what are they going to do next that's going to cause mom to get upset, or that's going to cause dad to lose his temper, or cause him to leave the house, or cause him to drink again. The children start to internalize the problems of the family and believe that they are the cause of the problems. And parents will actually go as far as to scapegoat one of the children and say, you're the reason your mom and I fight. And that's just too much. It's too crushing to put on a child. So now that child's system, as they go into adolescence and into adulthood, is completely calibrated around fear, it is no longer in its proper default state. And so you came into the world as an adult survivor, fearful, and that's your default state. And so you make all of your decisions motivated by fear. And if you don't make a decision, it was because you were afraid of making a decision. Everything is fear. So now, if you do one thing or the other, and you're stuck between two things, you're going to go with what you fear the most and go the opposite direction. Everything becomes fear. But if you're living in a fear state, that allows you to be controlled, and it makes you feel more and more out of control. You don't feel like you can accomplish things in your life. You may feel that you haven't accomplished anything. You may feel you haven't accomplished enough because you've lived in a fear state. So those who suffer from CPTSD, that common trait that they have is that fear, being fearful, being fear driven, living in constant fear. It hijacks the body, it hijacks the mind. So now you're primed for addiction because you will take anything, just anything, to take you out of the constant pain that you are in. And the pain is not just like when you hurt your finger hurts. Emotional pain, psychological pain is in the entire being. It's around the being, it's in the aura of the being, it's at the core of the being. And so imagine a child feeling that much pain. That child has no idea how to healthily alleviate pain like that. They become desperate for their caregivers to give them some modicum of love, appreciation, affection, attention, so that they can feel some relief. And going out into the world, going into college, or after high school, or in high school, or even in middle school, when offered a substance that's supposed to make them feel good, and they try it, and when the first high hits, ooh, they feel better than they've ever felt before. The high, the very first high from taking a synthetic substance, they are just floating on air, and they say, just internally in their subconscious, they say, this is it. I found it. I found the answer. And it's great news because they've been suffering their whole life. And so now all they have to do is take this pill or inject this substance or smoke this weed or this tobacco. All they have to do is drink this drink. It's like a potion, and it's a love potion. It'll bring them all of the beautiful feelings. And it's great because they don't want to be a burden on anyone. They would much rather be a drug addict than a burden on anyone. So they don't want to impose to anyone, hey, can I have some affection? Can I have some connection? No, this is the perfect solution. All they have to do is go and hide in a corner, just take this drug, and they're going to be feeling great. And so when that high dies down, they're like, okay, I'm in control of this. I'm in control of this. And they return back to that base fear, pain state. And so they know what they need to do. Okay, I'm feeling awful. So they go back, they take that pill, or they hit, or they snort, or they inject. And then they don't really get quite the same high. They feel better though. It definitely feels better. Right? So they say, all right, it didn't hit me this time, but I got an idea. I just use more of it, and then I can get that high again because I'm not getting the same high like I got the first time. So I'm just going to use more of the drug, and then I'm going to feel that high again. So they on that next try again, they double smoke, they double inject, they try to increase the dosage, and they figure this is going to work. Well, what actually ends up happening is the highs are getting less, and the lows afterwards are getting greater. The lows are getting deeper and more profound. The pain is getting more painful. The fear is getting more intense. Why is that happening? Well, they've gone into something by using drugs. They've gone into something that they didn't even understand scientifically. They thought this was going to be the magic fix to the pain from their childhood, and it's just the opposite. This will make everything worse because scientifically, that drug that they introduced into their system, their bodies are not made for that. We are not made to introduce synthetic dopamine into our system, synthetic serotonin boosts. So when you take the drug, when the addict first took the drug, they hit that high, but their system, their very intelligent brain, chemical, and bodily system said, whoa, This is a danger to our system because this high, this much dopamine is not normal. What can we do to make sure we survive this properly? How can we survive these drug dopamine surges? Well, let's flood the system with more negative chemicals to bring the system down, so that when we take that dopamine surge, it's going to bring us up to baseline. So now that high will become the new baseline, and that will keep us stabilized, because our job as the brain and our job as the body is to keep everything steady, balanced, and baseline. So the only way to balance a high like that is to bring them down, so that when they hit that high, now we're at that baseline. So the person goes back thinking this drug is going to give them that high again, and it doesn't. In fact, less and less, this just becomes the new normal. So they have to take the drug in order to just feel like themselves. I said they have to take the drug in order to just feel normal. And then someone comes along and says, hey, why don't you just quit? Why don't I quit? I can't function without this drug anymore. It's just not that simple. The brain actually changes. The whole chemical cocktail changes, and it changes in a way that's semi-permanent. So you're stuck. And if you've ever seen someone going through withdrawal, they're in a lot of pain because they've decided not to take the drugs. They're a few hours off of their dosage, and they're walking, they're pacing, they're shaking. They can be sweating. It can become very intense. Why? Because the body and the brain is like, hey, we need to get that high again, because that high is our baseline, and we can't live down here. You have to get us back to baseline. What are you doing, man? The intensity of the drive, the desire to get that drug again drives them to actually go against their own morals. They'll steal, they'll lie, they'll cheat, they'll manipulate. They become desperate. They're betraying their own character now, just to get that drug to bring them up to baseline, just to bring them back to feeling like themselves for a moment, to feel normal the way they're supposed to feel. And they feel like only the drug can help them at that point. Only the drug can make them feel normal. It's a sad story, but it's a true story, and it's happening every day around the world, constantly. It takes about 3 months for the body and the brain to recalibrate that chemical state so that you can feel normal again without the drug. 3 months. And that's of you totally being off of this drug. So most addicts, after a day or 2 or 3 or a few weeks, say, this is crazy. I can't live like this. They don't realize that this is all going to heal itself in 3 months. They're like, I can't do this. And they relapse. And they relapse again, and they relapse again. And when they go back to it, they never get that same first high, even if it's been a while. The body remembers and says, oh, okay, we know what to do here. This is our new baseline. Recalibrates, and they have to live in a whole new low as a result of introducing this drug in their system. Their body's just trying to balance it out. We're not made to take these drugs. We're not made to be in an addicted state. We're not made to be addicted to anything. We're not made to be addicted to food. We're not made to be addicted to sex. We're not made to be addicted to pornography, shopping, gambling, all of these things, because you can really be addicted to anything that releases dopamine, right? So all of these addictions are an attempt for a trauma survivor to fulfill the lack of connection that they feel, to fulfill the abandonment trauma, to get past the scars so that they can feel the way a human is supposed to feel: connected, safe, happy. It's a moment to get respite from the fear. And that's why, even though not all trauma survivors become addicts, all addicts are trauma survivors. Every single addict comes from a background of complex trauma. They were emotionally abused or neglected, or physically abused or neglected. There was some type of abuse, neglect, or trauma in their past before they become an addict. And there are some, like 2%, who are like, no, I became an addict with no trauma. But even them, I don't believe, because people don't even realize what a trauma is. Trauma is anything that violates the self, and it can be something you don't remember from your childhood. So whereas not every trauma survivor is going to become an addict, virtually every addict is actually a trauma survivor. And so everything that people have tried to help these addicts, many of these things have failed because they don't address the core issue. The core issue is the complex trauma. The reason they became addicted, the reason they keep going back, is because they have to heal the original wounds, the trauma from usually their childhood. When they are no longer dealing with the wounds of the trauma, then they have a fighting chance of not being attracted to alcohol, drugs, synthetic substances, or falling into addiction. Then they have a chance. But if they don't solve the original trauma, then they can't solve the addiction. So we are going to talk about right here, right now, what we can do to solve the trauma. We're going to talk about right now how you can break free of addiction. Because many of us here in this group are dealing with some type of addiction right now, or we have someone in our family, because most trauma survivors are either addicted themselves or they're codependent. So if you're a codependent, then you're probably married to some type of addict, right? So trauma survivors, we got started in households that had addictions a lot of times, and we end up as either addicted or married to or a partner to someone who has an addiction. So how do we solve this? How do we solve the addiction and the complex trauma? So your addictions, whether it's food or shopping or gambling, all these addictions are fueled by the flesh, the body, and the subconscious mind, your chemicals. So in order to solve the addiction, we have to get out of allowing our subconscious mind to be our leader. We have to get out of allowing the flesh to be our guide. And we have to start living as the higher self. When you are in your highest form, when you are the higher self, it's at that point that you're able to be in power, to be in control, to be in intelligence, to act in your morals, and to be compassionate. So the acronym I use for this is EPIC. And you should use this acronym because it helps you to snap quickly into that higher self, and it's not easy to do, right? Because it takes a few seconds, 5 to 7 seconds in a situation for the wise mind to even kick in. The cerebral cortex is slower to fire up than the limbic system, than the amygdala. But if we make decisions in our amygdala, our lives are just going to go out of control. But we can break free of addiction. We can make it through the 3 months of torture in our systems and get back to a healthy baseline. We can live our lives in love and in abundance when we get out of survival mode, when we stop living in fear. So recognize that fear has been a motivator in your life, and recognize that your subconscious has been trying to protect you. That's why it decided to put you into a fear state constantly. But that was when you were a kid. So now say to yourself, say to your subconscious mind, thank you. Thank you for trying to protect me. I will not be a prisoner of fear anymore. Thank you. I know you were looking out for me. But now, instead of living my life in fear, I'm going to live my life motivated by love. I want to live in a love abundant state. I want to have a dream and a vision of the future so that I can strive and stretch out toward my purpose. Yes, I'm afraid. Yes, I'm afraid, but that is courage. It's vulnerability. It's exposing yourself to risk. It's doing something despite the fact that you feel the fear. It's not a lack of fear. It's doing something despite the fact that you feel the fear. It's okay for us to have fear because fear keeps us safe. It can protect us, but we don't want to allow fear to prevent us. So we can't live according to fear. It's just something that we can check in with. So let's say you have a decision to make in life. Your very next decision after getting off of this call tonight, make sure it's not motivated by fear. Check in with the fear. What's my fear saying? Okay, my fear is worried that I'm going to look dumb and I'm going to do this and I'm going to say this, right? Check in with it, but then make the decision in the wise mind. Say, okay, thank you, fear. I hear what you're saying. I'm going to go ahead and live my life. Because love will dictate that speaking up in this group tonight could help someone else. And self-compassion will dictate that it could help me. So I'm gonna let the fear go. But thank you for informing me. Right? You can check in with it, but don't allow it to guide your life. To live in the higher self, according to the higher mind, remember EPIC, epic, because you want to be the epic self. That stands for ethical, powerful, intelligent, compassionate. Let's look at how this helps us to break free from addiction. When you show up as the ethical self is you in your moral mind. According to the religious principles that you're guided by, the epic self has morals, rules to what is right and what is wrong, what is most advantageous, what is healthy and what is unhealthy. The ethical self repudiates selfishness. For instance, in both Islam and Christianity, idolatry is frowned upon. That is the worship of anything other than the Creator. So if your faith frowns negatively upon worshiping anything other than the Creator, then you're realizing that giving your attention, your adoration, your devotion to anything other than the central one is tantamount to idolatry, including selfishness. Selfishness is a cousin of idolatry because you're actually elevating yourself to be a God. You're elevating your self-pleasure to be a God in your life. If you're ethical, if you're moral, and you'll realize it violates your morals to shop, be materialistic, gamble, use drugs and alcohol in a way that's self-pleasing because it's selfish and you don't desire to be a selfish person. We have to be able to balance all humanity and recognize that we treat others as equal to ourselves and we treat ourselves as equal to others. So to treat ourselves properly, ethically, we wouldn't hurt the flesh that we were given. We won't hurt the body that we're given. Just like we don't want to pollute the earth because this is the home that we were given, then we don't want to pollute the body because this is the vessel we were given. It's simple. When we look at it from an ethical perspective, you won't pick up the cigarette. You won't overdrink because you're working in your wiser mind instead of just according to the drive of the subconscious programs and the desire of the flesh. The P stands for powerful. When you're in your personal power, you are in your strength. A person who's in their personal power is not weak, is not saying, I can't. I don't have any control. I just don't have any control over it. It just lets me, I have to do whatever. No. When you're in your personal power, you recognize you are in control of what you do. You make all of your choices. You make your choices. You're going to be held responsible for them. So you take responsibility for your actions and you take actions to fulfill your responsibility. That's being in your personal power. So recognize you don't have to give in to an impulse just because you had an impulse. Oh, I smell cigarette smoke. I'd really love to smoke that cigarette. You don't have to give in to that impulse. You can be in your personal power. What if it's a sex addiction or pornography addiction? Just because you have the urge or the desire to fulfill that pull of your chemicals, you don't have to actually do it. You can sit in stillness. You can observe the desire wash through your body, and you can say to yourself, I'm observing that I have a strong desire right now. But going back to my moral self, my ethics, I realized that it's actually not good for me to support the porn industry, and I don't want to have any part in it. I also don't want to defile my mind with those images because it's not healthy and it violates my personal ethics. I don't want to go out and manipulate individuals in the community to fulfill my desires by going and sleeping with them when I have no love for them, I have no desire to them, and I'm giving them absolutely no commitment. That's not ethical. That's manipulation. That's using. Anything in entertainment that's telling you, oh yeah, you can be happy going out and sleeping around with strangers. That's a lie. Don't buy into that. That's not real. Sex is a beautiful thing. It's important for us not to pervert it into something that it's not meant to be. It works properly when there's a commitment between two individuals. Then the sex can flow along with the chemicals and the love and the serotonin and the oxytocin. That's what it's for. So if you're not in that committed relationship, then why would you think that going out and manipulating individuals to get into your bed or so that you can get into theirs is ethical in any way? It's not. You're in control of your actions. Personal power. You have the ability to breathe. You have the ability to meditate. You have the ability to educate. You have the ability to eat right. You don't have to get the entire pack of Oreos and bring it to the couch. You can go in, grab 3 to 5, and just sit down, eat those. You can exercise self-control. You are powerful. We're too busy trying to control everyone else and not spending enough time controlling ourselves. That's what happens to us. So as trauma survivors, we're like, hey, people, don't trigger me, okay? Don't trigger me. I don't want anybody to trigger me. Don't say this. We got rules, do's and don'ts. Don't say this, don't say that. But it's not your job to control everyone else. It's your job to not respond to your triggers. It's your job to be in stillness, to have self-control, to keep your voice at an even tone, to not yell at the children. It's your job to control yourself, to not fight and pick at your husband. It's your job. It's not their job to not trigger you. Okay, so instead of controlling everyone else and trying to control the world around us, focus on controlling the self. That is what we have autonomy and authority over. Be in your authority. Be in your authority. Step up to the plate. Man or woman, you are in control of you. You're responsible for you. Be in your personal power. The I stands for intelligence. When we're in our intelligent mind, we're in our wise mind. Both wisdom and intelligence, you look it up in the dictionary, it's got a definition that says the ability to apply what you know. To apply what you know. That means to put it into action. So you know what the right thing to do is, then do it. Do what you know is right. You're educated. Use the knowledge to your advantage. You know what cigarettes does to the body. You know what over drinking does to the body. Right? So you have to live your life according to wisdom, which is to apply the knowledge. It's foolishness to know something and then not apply it. To say, boy, I know crystal meth is really not good for you. Well, here we go. If you know what the chemicals are in the vape and you know that they're not good for you, then throw the vape in the garbage. That's wise. That's wisdom. Oh, this isn't good for me. Why would I have this in my house? Why would I have poison in my house? Something that I would be tempted to put my lips on a piece of poison. Why would I have that? Be in your wise mind. Combine that with your personal power. When you combine wisdom with power, ooh, there's nothing you can't do. And you combine that with morality. Oh, wow. Wow, that is the perfect leader. Someone who's wise, they're powerful, and they're moral, they're ethical. Imagine if every human on earth is in this, is an epic person. The C standing for compassion. It's the last and probably the most important, right? Because you have to have compassion. You have to have love. You have to live in love. But the love that you need is not about going out and finding some pairing of a woman, a man, or something. It's not about that. It's about you being a source of love. It's about this energy radiating from you and you radiating it back to yourself. That's being compassionate. That's being loving. Right? That's the concept of being in the image of the Creator. You be the being of love. You be the source of love. You should have so much love, so abundant with love that you become virtually unfazed by the negative actions and traits of others. When you're abundant in love, it's harder to become triggered because you're just feeling so much compassion for the people around you, even those who are acting in foolishness. You're full of love, compassion. To allow compassion to be a defining trait. And now we've described you in your perfect form. So take all of your great qualities, your empathy, your humor, your good looks, take all of your great qualities, and then add that to being personally powerful and present, being ethical, being intelligent, having compassion. And what do you get? You have an unstoppable human being. Don't allow addiction to weaken you. You were made to be more. You were made to be more. You rise above. You make the choice. It is a decision. You make the decision to rise above. If it's going to require some suffering right now, you get through that. You go through the 90 days of suffering, the withdrawal symptoms. You pull through, and we will support you. That's what I'm here for. There are addiction programs. 12-step programs work. They are effective. Join them. Not just for alcohol. Join them if you're married to an alcoholic because you're codependent. Join the 12-step programs. They work. But whatever you do, get yourself through the 90 days that's going to take to get your baseline at the right place. Work with me and my program to help you to heal the original wound, the original trauma wound, which is a false belief that you're carrying around that you're not worthy and you're not worthy of love and you're not in control and you have to be in fear. Get these false beliefs corrected so that you can fulfill your true potential. Reach out for your purpose and change the world, because that's what you were meant to do. You're meant to be a world changer, a world improver. That's what we're designed for. We're not designed to destroy our own home. It makes no sense. We're not designed to destroy our own flesh. It makes no sense. We're designed to enhance ourselves and enhance each other and enhance life for each other and enhance the world around us. We have heights to hit. And when you reach out for your purpose in life, you can hit amazing heights. I had an amazing conversation with a survivor last night. We started looking into her purpose. She said she wanted to help immigrants. She just wanted to help immigrants. We started talking about ways she could do that. Got into translation work. She's like, I already do I've been doing translation for my family since I was a child. I would love to do that. I feel so fulfilled doing that type of work. Now I can already just see her in her future, just crushing it, changing people's lives, being a translator, helping them to feel like someone cares about them on this difficult journey that they're on as an immigrant. We need you. Just about 99% of the people in this group, the 30 in on our Zoom call, the 45 on our TikTok live, just about everyone here is an empath, an empathic person. It's a gift. Being an empath is a gift. Yes, you're going to need to learn how to use it so you're not becoming overwhelmed with everyone else's problems and absorbed and losing yourself. To know how to put a stop to it when it comes to narcissistic abusers, you got to be able to cut off your empathy cold for certain people. So you got to learn. You got to get your ego built up, but your empathic abilities are a superpower. And we need more empaths in positions of power and positions of authority. Do you understand? We need you in positions of power and positions of authority. Because if this entire world is led by empaths, we're living in a nirvana. So please, reach out for your purpose and step up and become the epic self.